She knocked on my door like she still owned my life. 7 years after my husband died, my mother-in-law walked in, heels sharp, voice colder than the air outside, and said, "We're going to the lawyer. I know about the house." I hadn't even told my daughter yet. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just came to take over, again. But what she didn't know was that this time I had a letter. A letter from a woman no one expected to believe in me. And that letter, it changed everything. The morning started with burnt toast and a broken coffee maker. I was rinsing Sophie's lunchbox when the knock came. Not a polite tap, but the kind of knock that says, "I don't need permission to be here." I opened the door, and there she stood. Margaret Langford, my late husband's mother. A tailored navy coat, perfect lipstick at 8 a.m., and a leather handbag clutched like a briefcase. I hadn't seen her in 6 weeks, long enough for me to almost start breathing easier. "We need to talk," she said, brushing past me into the house. She walked through the entry like she owned the place, same as always. "I know about the house," she said over her shoulder. "The one Isabel left you. Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't answer, mostly because I still didn't believe it myself. Less than 12 hours earlier, I'd gotten a call from a lawyer in Savannah informing me that Isabel Kingsley, Evan's estranged great-aunt, had left me her entire estate. A historic townhouse on Whitaker Lane, a cottage near Tybee Beach, and a bank account large enough to make my head spin. I'd met Isabel 3 times in my life. Margaret had already made herself at home in my kitchen, opening the fridge, judging the contents. "Still buying off-brand groceries," she muttered. "And look at Sophie, skin and bones. What are you feeding her?" 7 years of this. 7 years of being told I wasn't enough. I used to let her. Because she watched Sophie after school. Because she helped with Evan's funeral. Because I didn't want Sophie to lose her grandmother on top of her father. But somewhere in the back of my mind, something had begun to shift. "We have an appointment with the lawyer at 10, she announced, smoothing her skirt as she sat at my kitchen table. "We?" "Yes, we. I cleared my schedule. This kind of thing needs oversight. You've never managed anything like this." She pulled a notepad from her purse and clicked a pen. "We need to ask about the estate value, taxes, investments. I've already lined up a financial advisor." I blinked. She wasn't asking, she was assigning roles. Like always. I glanced at the fridge. Sophie's crayon drawings, her spelling test with a gold star, a picture of us at the park. This was my life, flawed, quiet mine. Margaret leaned in. "Let me help, Cassie, for Sophie's sake." Always Sophie's sake. She didn't notice my fists curling under the table, or the silent rebellion building in my chest. She didn't see the envelope in my nightstand, the one with Isabel's letter. The letter that said, "Don't let love be a leash." I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I was done letting Margaret make the decisions. Not this time. The night before Margaret showed up, everything had been still. Sophie had gone to bed early, her cheek pressed against a pillowcase dotted with fireflies. I was folding laundry when the call came. "Ms. Monroe?" the voice on the other end asked. "My name is Harold Bain. I'm a probate attorney in Savannah. I'm calling on behalf of Ms. Isabel Kingsley." I sat down, a shirt still half folded in my lap. He spoke calmly, like what he was about to say wouldn't shift the ground under my feet. "Ms. Kingsley named you the sole beneficiary of her estate. This includes her townhouse, beach property, and associated assets." I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't seen Isabel in nearly 8 years. She had always been quiet at family functions, offering small smiles and even smaller conversations. After I hung up, I went to my bedroom. That's when I saw it. An envelope sitting neatly on my nightstand, like it had always been there. Cream paper, my name written in looping cursive. "To Cassie, with love, Isabel." I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. "Dear Cassie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be sad for me. I had a good run. I left you what I had not because of pity or obligation, but because I saw something in you I saw in myself years ago. You're stronger than you've ever been told. Please remember this. You do not owe anyone your silence. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to protect your peace. With love, Isabel." I don't remember how long I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands. The next thing I knew, I was crying. Real tears. The kind I hadn't let myself cry since Evan died. Not out of sadness, but something else. Relief, recognition, maybe even rage. Because someone saw me. Not Margaret, not even Evan, truthfully, but Isabel. A woman I barely knew saw that I'd been trying to survive, not live. That night I didn't sleep. I reread the letter at least 6 times, letting each sentence rebuild the part of me that had gone quiet. And by morning I had a new feeling in my chest. Not fear, but fire. The next morning, after Margaret stormed into my house like it was an open boardroom, she pulled out her infamous notepad. Yellow, lined, and riddled with bullet points and underlined phrases. She spread it across the kitchen table like a war map. This is what we'll need, she said, tapping the paper. Title transfers, property inspections, account consolidations. I've scheduled a consultation with my advisor, Donahue and Sons. They're very discreet. I didn't respond. I watched the way she uncapped her pen, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Because she had. Not with legal matters, but with me. She'd orchestrated Evan's funeral, picked out Sophie's pediatrician, planned every birthday party with color-coded lists and guilt. This was just her latest production. I've also drafted a preliminary budget. We'll put most of it in a trust for Sophie. That cottage by the beach? We can sell it. High demand in that area. And the townhouse? I say rent it out and find something more practical for you two. I blinked. We. There it was again. That small, possessive syllable that erased me from my own life. I stood up. My hands were calm, but my heart was screaming. Margaret didn't notice. She was already flipping pages. I walked down the hall and into my bedroom, pulled open the drawer where I kept an old spiral notebook I used for grocery lists and teacher notes. I sat on the edge of the bed, pen in hand, and on the first blank page I wrote in big block letters, my life, my plans. Then I started my own list. See the townhouse, alone. Meet the neighbors, ask about Isabel. Visit the beach cottage, breathe in salt air. Talk to Sophie, not just protect, talk. Find a lawyer, not hers, mine. I stared at the list. It was simple, unfinished, mine. Back in the kitchen, Margaret was still talking when I returned. And I'll reach out to a probate accountant. You don't want to get blindsided by taxes. She didn't look up. She didn't see the shift. I smiled. Thanks for the advice, I said evenly, but I'll take it from here. She froze. Her pen hovered in midair. I'm serious, I added. This inheritance, it's not a family project, it's mine, and I'm not outsourcing my future. For the first time in a long time, Margaret was speechless. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning started like any other. Cereal, mismatched socks, a half-packed lunch. Sophie was brushing her hair at the mirror when the landline rang. No one really used it anymore, which made it ring louder somehow, like a warning. I picked up. Cassie Monroe? The voice was clipped, official. This is Marlene Hart from the Georgia Department of Family Services. We've received a concern regarding your household and would like to schedule a visit. I froze. The room spun just enough to make me grip the countertop. I understand, I said automatically. When would you like to come? We scheduled for Friday. As soon as I hung up, I knew where the complaint had come from. I didn't even have to guess. Margaret had finally played her trump card. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about control. It had always been. I called Ian Caldwell, the attorney I'd researched the night before. His voice was calm, firm. I told him everything. Isabel's will, the inheritance, Margaret's reaction, and now, this threat. He didn't gasp, he didn't hesitate. We see this more than you'd think, he said. It's called coercive retaliation. Family members who feel slighted will do anything to reassert control. I need help, I whispered. You have it. That night, I gathered every document I could think of. Sophie's school reports, her immunization record, my pay stubs, even the lease agreement for our current apartment. I labeled everything. I made copies. I stayed up past midnight organizing proof of a life I had built with quiet care. The next morning, Sophie noticed my expression at breakfast. Mom, she asked softly, are we in trouble? I smiled, or tried to. No, sweetheart. Someone just doesn't like that we're finally making our own choices. She nodded like she understood more than she should have to at 13. After I walked her to the bus stop, I came home and found the yellow notepad Margaret had left behind. It was still on my kitchen table, bold with assumptions. I picked it up. I tore the first page out, then the second. One by one, I shredded her plans, her bullet points, her capital letter confidence. Then I dropped the pile into the trash. The silence afterward was deep and beautiful. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing myself for what she might say. I was preparing for what I would do. Friday couldn't come fast enough. Friday arrived with a gray sky and a stillness that felt too heavy. Sophie had already gone to school, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she waved goodbye. I watched her disappear down the block before closing the door and exhaling. I'd spent the morning preparing. Every document Ian suggested was stacked in a folder. Report cards, attendance sheets, proof of income, lease agreements, utility bills. There was even a note from Sophie's homeroom teacher commending her leadership in group projects. At 2 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Marlene Hart stood there in a tan trench coat, short gray hair, and the kind of expression that didn't waver. Mrs. Monroe, she said, I appreciate your time. I offered her tea. She declined. We sat in the living room, the folder between us like a shield I hadn't yet raised. She opened a thin manila envelope of her own and clicked her pen. A report was submitted by a Ms. Margaret Langford, she began, without glancing up. She alleges concern over your emotional stability following a large inheritance. She believes the change in your circumstances may be affecting your daughter's well-being. I didn't flinch. I'd like to hear your side, she added. So I told her, not in anger, not defensively, just the truth. That I had raised Sophie alone for 7 years, that I worked full-time, paid every bill, attended every parent-teacher conference, that our routine had not changed since the inheritance, except that I now had more hope than fear. Then I slid the folder forward. Marlene flipped through the pages silently. Her eyes lingered on Sophie's school awards and a printed calendar of her extracurriculars: drama club, soccer, piano. You seem prepared, she said. I am, I answered, because I knew who sent that report. She nodded. We receive cases like this often. Family members who disagree with a parent's decisions may misuse this process. We still have to follow up. I understand. I will need to speak with your daughter, at your convenience. Possibly a neighbor or two as well. That's fine. She paused, then added, You'd be surprised how often people mistake control for concern. I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. When she left, I stood in the doorway for a long minute, watching the street, watching the way the wind stirred the branches on the trees. That evening, Sophie curled up next to me on the couch, her socks mismatched, a textbook resting on her lap. How'd it go? She asked. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. It went well. She's going to talk to you soon. Just be honest, okay? Okay. She hesitated. What if they believe Grandma? I looked her straight in the eyes. Then we show them the truth, together. She leaned into me, and for a moment all the noise in my chest quieted. Because I wasn't just fighting for property or paperwork. I was fighting for peace. And I wasn't alone anymore. It happened on a Tuesday. I'd dropped Sophie off at school, stopped by the grocery store, and was putting away the milk when I saw the envelope. Not in the mailbox, not handed to me by a stranger. It had been slipped under my door. Unmarked, folded, sharp-edged. I opened it slowly, already knowing what I'd find. Margaret's handwriting, tight, controlled. You're hurting Sophie by cutting us out. You may think you're protecting her, but you're destroying what's left of her family. You'll regret this. I promise you that. No signature, but she didn't need to sign it. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, staring at the Spanish moss swaying in the wind. I thought of Evan, of Isabel, of all the ways Margaret had inserted herself into my life under the name of love. But this wasn't love, this was war. The next day I drove to the townhouse. I hadn't been back since the first legal visit, too busy preparing documents, bracing for interviews, and protecting Sophie. But something in me said, go back. I parked out front and stepped through the iron gate. The house felt different now, less foreign, more watchful, like it had been waiting for me to return. I walked from room to room slowly, touching doorknobs, running fingers along old wood banisters, hearing echoes that didn't haunt. In the upstairs bedroom, I found it, tucked in the bottom drawer of Isabel's writing desk, a folder, labeled only with her initials, IK. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some from cousins, some from old friends, and 3 from Margaret Langford. I read the first 2 quickly, mild, passive-aggressive, full of thinly veiled barbs. But the third, dated 2 years before Isabel's passing, was different. You have no idea what Cassie's really like. She's manipulative in the softest way, smiles and silence. Don't let her fool you. She wants your attention because she's never earned it anywhere else. My stomach twisted. But beneath that sentence, in Isabel's unmistakable handwriting, she had underlined the word manipulative and written, or maybe I'm the only one who's ever actually seen her. My breath caught. I closed the folder with trembling hands. This was everything. Proof that Margaret had tried to discredit me long before the inheritance, and proof that Isabel hadn't been fooled. Not for a second. I texted Ian that afternoon and told him what I'd found. He replied in under 5 minutes. Bring it in. This changes everything. And I knew for the first time that Margaret's narrative wasn't the only one anymore, because I had the truth, in handwriting, in history, and soon, in court. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon polish, a sandstone building with ivy crawling up its north side, tall windows that filtered in light like truth trying to get in. I arrived 30 minutes early, hair tied back, navy blazer, no makeup, no armor but my steadiness. Ian met me at the front steps, holding a slim briefcase and calm like a shield. You ready? He asked. I don't think I've ever been more. Inside, the courtroom was wood-paneled and clinical, the kind of room where legacies get rewritten by strangers. Margaret arrived 10 minutes late. Her lipstick was brighter than usual, pearls, heels, a face that looked like it had been carved out of control and dried approval. Her daughter Cynthia followed, carrying a thick folder that looked too heavy for its contents. They didn't look at me. They didn't need to. They assumed they already owned the narrative. When the judge entered, everyone stood. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp gray eyes and a reputation for not suffering fools. The session opened with Margaret's lawyer, Mr. Clay, painting me as an opportunist. She cultivated an unnatural attachment with Ms. Kingsley in the final years of her life. My client is simply asking the court to examine whether undue influence played a role in the drafting of the will. I didn't flinch. Then Ian stood, no theatrics, no defense tricks. We will present documentation, letters, and testimony, showing that not only was Ms. Kingsley of sound mind, but that she actively shielded Ms. Monroe from repeated attempts by others to exert control over her affairs. This is not a story of manipulation, it's one of protection. And then it began. They questioned me for over an hour. How often had I seen Isabel? Had she ever hinted at changing her will? Had I accepted any gifts before her death? I answered every question plainly. I didn't sell drama. I gave them truth. She invited us to her home regularly. She taught Sophie how to play checkers. She shared family stories I'd never heard before. It was quiet, and it was real. When Margaret took the stand, her tone shifted like wind through polished stone. Isabel was lonely. She was vulnerable. Cassie has always known how to look small, to draw sympathy. But I'm telling you, she's not who you think she is. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have any documentation of coercion? Margaret hesitated. No, but I've known her for 15 years. I know what she's capable of. Ian stood calmly. We'd like to enter into evidence a letter from the deceased, annotated by her own hand, refuting exactly that narrative. He passed the folder to the clerk. The judge read it slowly. I held my breath. Then she looked up and asked, Ms. Monroe, did you ever ask to be named in this will? No, Your Honor. Did you expect to inherit anything? No. What did you expect from Ms. Kingsley? I paused. Her stories, her time, that was already more than enough. The judge nodded once. By the time she adjourned for deliberation, the air had shifted. It didn't feel like I'd won, but it no longer felt like I was losing. Outside, Margaret brushed past me. You've made a terrible mistake, she said. I turned to her. No, I finally stopped making them. She blinked, her mouth tightened. You've turned Sophie against me. I smiled. No, you did that all on your own. She looked like she might strike me, but she didn't. She walked away instead. Click, 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 her heels echoing against the marble floor like a retreat. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't shrink. I stood. 2 weeks after the court ruled in my favor, Sophie and I moved into the townhouse on Whitaker Lane. The probate judge had taken less than 4 days to make her decision, citing overwhelming evidence of testamentary intent and clear, written disapproval of any opposing influence. Margaret didn't appeal. I think, in her heart, she knew she'd already lost more than just a case. She lost control. She lost the version of me she thought she could keep small forever. The first night in the new house was strangely quiet. Sophie wandered from room to room in her socks, marveling at the creaky floors and tall windows, pulling open every drawer like she was hunting for treasure. Do you think Isabel used these spoons every day? She asked, holding up a slightly tarnished silver piece with an ornate floral handle. I smiled. She didn't seem like the save-it-for-special-occasions type. That stuck with me, so I lit candles in the dining room for no reason. We used the good china for frozen lasagna. I stopped saving the nice things for later. I stopped saving myself for later. 2 weeks after the move, I turned in my resignation at the permit office. No big speech, no cake, just a quiet, deliberate ending. With a portion of the inheritance, I opened something I never had the courage to imagine, a studio space. Not for yoga or pottery, just a wide, open room with high ceilings, north-facing light, and too many plants. A space for writing, for photography, for future things I hadn't named yet. People started asking questions. You live in that Kingsley house? Yes. Did she really leave it to you? She did. And always, eventually, why you? I never answered with just one sentence, because the truth was layered. Isabel left me the house because I stayed, because I listened. Because when others saw an old woman with faded curtains and forgotten connections, I saw someone who refused to disappear. She didn't leave me a house, she left me permission. To stop apologizing, to stop shrinking, to take up space. Sophie thrived in her new school. She joined drama club, played a firefly in A Midsummer Night's Dream. I cried through the whole performance. After the show, Margaret was waiting near the exit. She wore black, not mourning, more like performance. She held a small gift bag, tissue paper sticking out in awkward angles. I just wanted to see her, she said. That's not a crime, is it? No, I replied, but showing up like this isn't the way. She hesitated, then held out the bag. I brought her something. I took it. I'll give it to her. She met my eyes. I'm not the villain you think I am. No, I said gently. You're the woman who let fear wear the face of love. She blinked, but I didn't flinch. Back home, Sophie opened the gift. a charm bracelet with a single letter S and a note that read, "For all the birthdays I missed, love, Grandma." She looked up at me. I didn't tell her to forgive. I didn't tell her to be angry. I just said, "It's your choice." She placed the bracelet in her drawer. "Maybe later," she said. That was enough. Spring came early to Savannah that year. Sophie planted herbs on the windowsill and named them things like Queen Basil and Duke Thyme. She laughed more, slept better. So did I. One afternoon, we sipped lemonade on the porch swing. She turned to me. "Do you think Dad would have liked this house?" I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them to magnolia branches swaying above. "I think he would have loved seeing us in it, safe, free, ours." She leaned her head on my shoulder. And just like that, the house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home. Sometimes the people who try hardest to control us are the ones who fear losing their version of who we used to be. But growth demands space, healing requires silence, and real freedom begins when we stop asking for permission. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I finally chose peace over legacy, truth over tradition, my voice over their narrative. So if you've ever been made to feel small for choosing your own path, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your blood. You get to choose your voice. You get to write your ending. And sometimes, saying no more is the most loving thing you'll ever do. Sometimes freedom doesn't come in the form of money or property or a courtroom win. It comes in a quiet moment, when you finally stop shrinking for people who never saw your worth in the first place. Cassie didn't fight for revenge. She fought for peace, for the right to raise her daughter without fear, for the right to say no and mean it. And if you've ever been told to stay small to keep the family peace, maybe it's time to write your own ending too. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending for more stories where silence ends and truth begins. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is no more.